Good morning. Thank you all for coming. I know that some of you, when I walked this morning, some of you were already here at 6 o'clock, so your hours are pretty long too. Let me start with some prepared remarks, and then I'm going to take some questions, and then I have another meeting, and I'm going to leave after some questions, and Charlie will stay as long as you want him to stay to answer the technical questions and to dig as deep as you want to dig in the budget. The challenges we face in North Carolina are unprecedented in modern times. Our nation is in the midst of the greatest economic crisis since the Great Depression. It's the result, as you know, of the rapid and dramatic global downturn in both the housing and the financial markets all over the world. As families and businesses across our state are tightening their belts to make ends meet around the kitchen table, I believe that government must do the same. But in the process, we cannot neglect or ignore the state's most pressing needs. So the budget that I'm releasing today, I believe, makes strategic investments that will create jobs, increase overall per-student spending, and it is a balanced budget. The budget that I will submit to the General Assembly later this afternoon closes a cumulative budget gap, and I hope you write this, it's really a big number, of $6.4 billion over 2 years, with an estimated shortfall that totals $3.4 billion in fiscal year 2009 and 10 and $3 billion in 10 and 11. That's the hand we've dealt, and that's on top, as you know, of the 2.2 hole that we have had to fill between now and June 30th. It contains $2.6 billion in spending reductions, more than ever in the history of North Carolina, $1.3 billion each year. It does utilize $2.9 billion of federal recovery money to support education and other mission-critical services over the biennium, and we're grateful for that partnership with the federal government. And it does recommend targeted revenue changes that total $1.3 billion over the 2 years, designed to protect education and really to help offset health care and social costs associated with the use of tobacco and alcohol products. Most general funds programs that we looked at face reduced or level funding in this budget compared to 08-09. However, despite the difficult road that we face, we worked really hard to continue making some progress to carry North Carolina forward and to prepare us to catapult in the 21st century as the economy recovers, and it will recover. And so the investments that I strategically have made in this budget document is important, I believe, to the core future success of the state, and as importantly to the values that we hold that have made North Carolina such a great state. So my budget focuses on and is divided into 7 areas, maybe 8, I didn't count them this morning. Growing North Carolina's economy, improving public education, keeping higher ed accessible and affordable, that's community college, vocational school, and the university, protecting our most vulnerable citizens, that's our responsibility, keeping our communities safe, making government more efficient and accountable, and finally, fiscal responsibility. Those priorities are woven throughout the budget document, and they do reflect, I believe, both transparency and accountability, which are the drivers for this administration. If you look at how I address growing North Carolina's economy, the number one priority, and you've heard me say it since the day I was sworn in, is to create jobs. And my budget contains key investments around infrastructure, assistance to small business, and workforce development, all important investments. For example, there's an initiative in the budget that's called Jobs Now. My budget makes substantial investments in community college and vocational and technical programs that prepare our students of all ages for the in-demand jobs in the 21st century careers that are available to them in this global economy. It does include $5 million to hire additional faculty to reduce the state's backlog for nurses. That makes good sense. The jobs are there. We need to train the people to take the jobs. We want to fill those shortages in areas where we know we have jobs. My budget also provides $3 million to support technical education programs in areas that we know are healthy and vibrant and going to grow in the next decade: transportation, industrial sectors, the military, and the green economy. It provides an additional $5 million annually to meet the equipment and the technology needs of the community college system. Not enough, but another bite of that apple during these very tenuous times. $5 million in federal recovery funds are dedicated in the budget to help displaced workers with their tuition costs and their child care costs and their transportation costs while pursuing their job training. I saw those needs firsthand the day I visited the Employment Security Commission. The budget invests $7 million in Main Street Solutions, programs that I believe will help revitalize small towns and communities across North Carolina. I live in a town that looks different today because of the effect and the impact of one of the Main Street grants years ago. I believe it will help create jobs in these rural and suburban communities. Provides $2 million for the Small Business Innovation Research Matching Grant Program. We've been told over and over that this helps people spur on their capacity to start a business and to succeed. And it does start construction of the only capital project in the budget, the Biomedical Research Imaging Center at UNC Chapel Hill. After visiting there and talking with the professors and the scientists and the employers and the researchers in this area, I believe that we must invest in that project so we can create jobs and technology and learning that will continue to precipitate growth in our pharmaceutical and drug creation enterprise in North Carolina. The budget provides $2 million to promote North Carolina as a business and tourism destination and to help us better market our agricultural products around the world. This makes good sense. Tourism is the number 2 economy in North Carolina. It costs us very little to get people who are looking for a short trip or a long trip to come to North Carolina and see the beauty that we have to offer. It also earmarks, as you would count on me doing, $5 million for the Green Business Fund. I believe this will continue to spur growth of businesses that are here all over our state developing green technology and actually laying the foundation for America and the world's global solutions for this century. Finally, something that I thought was very important to do, it provides $36 million in tax relief for small businesses, and it creates a founder's tax credit so that these early stage investments in entrepreneurial businesses and the pharmaceutical industry will be made right here in North Carolina, from the lab to the marketplace. Improving public education. How do I do that? I believe that even in these tough economic times, North Carolina has to remain committed to improving public education and to transforming our classrooms. Overall, in the budget, in year-to-year spending for public schools, including the federal recovery monies, there's a $118 million increase, even though at the same time we have a declining enrollment of about 0.79%. Total per student funding increases from $55.97 to $57.36. There are also some reductions, as there had to be, to the single largest expenditure in the state's budget. The reductions focus on administrative efficiencies. They allow local education leaders the flexibility to choose where savings can be implemented. They have shown us they can do this before, and they can do it again. My budget does include $4.7 million for diagnostic assessments so that we can really capture kids' learning problems and challenges before they actually fall behind in school in reading and math. We are refocusing North Carolina's testing requirements to more accurately measure students' progress and to hold schools and classrooms accountable. The budget sets us on that course. I also am recommending $7 million in additional recurring funds for an innovative dropout prevention program and $3.5 million for statewide support for underperforming schools in response to the Leandro lawsuit. It funds $64 million for the experience-based step increase for the teacher salary schedule. That's important to North Carolina as we continue our goal of paying teachers at or above the national level. It's one of the primary ways we'll get people to enter and stay in the teaching profession. Finally, this budget does not reduce, redirect, or transfer any lottery or corporate income tax receipts from the public school capital fund. And then we move to higher education. I believe the investments that we make in our current and the future workforce are never more important than they are in a downturn period. This budget fully funds the enrollment growth in both the community college and the university system. That had to be a top priority for me. It provides $3 million in a contingency fund for North Carolina's community college system because you and I both know they're going to need that money this year as they see a spike in their enrollment due to the continuing deteriorating employment climate we find in this state. My budget does take steps toward fulfilling the college promise of accessible, debt-free higher education for everyone, along with a seamless education path from pre-K through vocational community college or university that fits a student's needs. It includes $2.5+ million to expand early college high schools to 12 new sites. If you haven't visited one, you should. It's the most incredible thing that's happening in America's educational system. An additional $23 million for need-based financial aid. We're serious about helping students get to school even when they can't afford it. Protecting our most vulnerable citizens. That's the responsibility of all of us in North Carolina, not just of state government. This is what state government's going to do, but I'm going to partner with faith-based organizations and other community support groups across North Carolina so we all pitch in and do our part during a recession like we find ourselves in. The budget preserves funds that protect and help the most vulnerable. It did limit, and it does limit, reductions in direct services. It limits those and does not displace persons who are being served by Medicaid. That was a priority for me. Many provider reimbursement rates have been frozen, but I refuse to do anything to reduce the base service rates anymore because we have to have providers that will serve low-income people in North Carolina. The budget includes $12 million in the mental health arena to purchase an additional 111 local private hospital beds for mental health patients who require short-term. If we're going to continue the route to community institutionalization or placement, then we have to have the capacity, the network, to provide those services in communities. It does also invest $3 million to retain 36 overflow beds here at Dorothea Dix. It recommends, and I'm glad, additional funding for the state's children's health insurance program. At the end of the day, we will provide health insurance for an additional 8,000 children from working families all across North Carolina. And it earmarks federal recovery funds to reduce the waiting list for child care subsidies. Both of these items are critical any time, but especially in a time of economic hardships. Finally, we have in this budget provided tax relief to low and moderate income working families by increasing the earned income tax credit from 5 to 6.5%. I implore the General Assembly to support that increase. And then we move to something that's a core service of state government, which is keeping our communities safe. And Last week, some of you heard me speak about this while I was in the mountains. My budget invests an additional $12 million per year in the probation system. This gives us 29 more supervisors spread across the state and 117 probation officers, which will begin to help us make the caseloads these folks carry more manageable. It's not the end-all and be-all, but it's a first big step. Funds are also in this part of the budget to increase the pay employee grades to improve the recruitment and retention of these officers. And finally, I have pulled $15 million from the federal recovery funds and earmarking them for gang-related programs, which is critical across North Carolina. And then I moved to making government more efficient and accountable. The budget that will be submitted later today reinforces my personal commitment, and I believe the wants of the people of North Carolina, to streamline government, to make it more accountable, and to make it more transparent and efficient. It includes $2.6 billion in savings throughout state government, recommendations that follow a set of very important principles. $2.6 billion. Y'all, that's not chump change. First, whenever possible, I propose recurring savings rather than one-time actions. Second, when I looked at the savings across the agency, I understood from the years I've done this that one size simply does not fit all. I asked my agency heads to take a targeted approach when identifying their reductions with the overall goal of putting our people back to work, protecting the classroom, and providing essential service. My budget reduces or eliminates more than 20 programs, and I think you have a list of those, that are, in my mind, duplicative, costly, inefficient, or absolutely non-essential. I've only been in office a couple of months, but from my own personal experience with state government, I continue to believe that there are more savings and efficiencies to be found, more projects that can be reduced or eliminated. That's why last week you saw me name the co-chairs of my Budget Accountability and Reform Commission. I will appoint the other members of this group by the end of the week. The folks who are serving on this commission are all fairly sophisticated with knowledge about state government. They can go to work. They don't need on-the-job training. Their mission is going to be to look at the continuation budget from ground zero to identify inefficiencies, duplications, and programs that have outlived their usefulness to the people of North Carolina. Next year, when we do this exercise on the short session budget, I intend to have a list of thoroughly vetted programs to eliminate in North Carolina. This budget includes additional investments to update the state's web portal service and to implement North Carolina Open Book that I believe so much in. It does provide some funds to stabilize Beacon, the resources and payroll system that you've written and talked about so eloquently. And it reflects my commitment and pledge to end the monies transferred to the Highway Trust Fund to the General Fund by steadily dropping the amount of that transfer. If you look at the fiscal responsibility of the overall budget, and I've done that for 6 years as the budget chairman, and now for 2 months as the governor, it's easy to see that we are experiencing a dramatic decline in revenue because of the recession. Yet the actions that we're taking are prudent and decisive to produce a balanced budget. The budget recommends $360 million, or 1.8% less than the fiscal year 2009 budget. Before you write that, let me finish the sentence. That's even after assuming an additional $200 million in the local Medicaid expenses that the state has taken over. And it's also after factoring in the largesse of the federal recovery funds. We have cut $360 million out of the bottom line, on top of all the other hard decisions we've made. Our population is expected to increase by 1.5% next year. So the per capita budget will actually decline by 3.2% when compared to 2009. Or if I didn't have the recovery funds, I would be looking at a net savings of 10.8%. So we did some serious business. You'll also note, I hope, that this budget does not authorize any more additional debt in 2009-10. I believe that move is critical in these times as we work diligently to preserve our status as only one of 7 states in the country with a AAA bond rating. This budget does not increase broad-based taxes. I refuse to do that. Instead, I recommend targeted increased revenues from the sale of tobacco products and alcohol, discretionary purchases that we all make to produce in such a way that we will reduce the tremendous health care costs and the social costs for the state. I looked at some numbers this morning, and some statistics say tobacco-related illnesses cost from $2 to $6 billion a year in our state. I believe, looking at the former chair of the Health and Wellness Trust Fund, this is an important move for health care in North Carolina. Finally, this budget creates a fiscal responsibility reserve. It's a title. It'll go into the rainy day, but we've called it this. I hope to get the attention of folks on Jones Street. Fiscal responsibility, it's money left on the bottom line, as a cushion should the economy further erode or not recover as quickly as we are anticipating. I do have all intentions, as the recovery begins, to replace the rainy day fund. We have a long history in North Carolina, across this state, of stepping up to the plate and working together when people really need us. I stand ready this morning to work with the General Assembly to strengthen and to grow our middle class and small businesses, to improve public education and public safety throughout the state, and really to ensure that in the 21st century our government works smarter for our citizens as we expand opportunity from the mountains to the coast. I'll be glad to take some questions. Charlie, come on up. Oh, look at you all. You're not shy. Yeah.
The glancing, it looks like there are 1,000 jobs eliminated.
About 1,400.
1,400. Can you speak to how many of those are positions eliminated versus people who have a job who won't?
Charlie will talk to that in the specifics of the budget job. They're both. But if you look at the truth in budgeting piece, that's how you really get at the cuts in state government.
I'm going to follow up to that real quick. People will lose their jobs as part of this budget.
I hope not.
You hope not?
I hope not. But right now there are 1,400 positions. Yes, sir.
Governor, for weeks you've talked about the fact that people are going to be angry at you when this day came. Could you talk about what you've been through in this whole process and what you say to those people today?
Well, it's I'm a big girl and can take on a challenge. I'm not afraid of challenges. Everybody knows that. My husband tells me I'm mighty tough sometimes, and I guess I am. So it's been hard. I mean, the choices are hard. And when I looked at the budget, if I'd had the benefit of a healthy economy this time 2 years ago, I would have made tremendous improvement in the redesign of high schools across North Carolina and focus on the middle schools. I know where our trouble spots are, and I regret that this year we've done some but very little to help move education forward. I understand that in a aging population like North Carolina has, we've done very little to invest in the future of our graying population. We do an Alzheimer's respite care and a little more community care, but those were hard decisions for me because I'm so fundamentally wed to jobs and health care and schools. And then overall, the biggest regret that I have, and I couldn't figure out how to do it, and I'm hoping to partner with the federal government to do it, is that I really do believe us so strongly that North Carolina's leadership must position our people across the state to participate through technology in a global economy. And right now, we are not prepared to do that. My line at the State of the State was really true. Kids come to school with more technology in their backpack and their pockets than they find in their classrooms. And we expect those people to go out and get a job in a global economy anchored by technology. As a people, we've got to do better on last mile coverage and on high speed across the state. You can get it if you can afford it. Yeah.
About your cigarette tax increase, how did you come up with the idea of a $1 increase? And I talked to Senator Perdue, who represents Reynolds American area, and she says you might as well just put an axe to the tobacco industry based on a tax like that. What's your response to that? And also the first question.
Well, I hope it doesn't put an axe to the tobacco companies. I have no intention of doing that. And I've listened and talked to a lot of tobacco advocates, both for and against the tax over the last 2 years. Obviously, I have watched with concern, deep concern, as the healthcare costs related to tobacco usage continues to grow in North Carolina. And the literature is fairly clear that to keep kids from smoking, you've got to increase the prices. And as you know, I've been a leader in that effort in my work with the Health Commission. So it's quite apparent that I would continue on that path as governor. I have talked again with farmers and other people. There is still a tremendous global market for the product. North Carolina has one of the best lines of tobacco available anywhere in the world. I do not believe that this will cause a diminishing of the enterprise in North Carolina.
You don't fully fund salaries in this budget. That some other states do that. It's been rejected before by the General Assembly. What are your thoughts about how that will be accepted by?
Well, I'm anxious to have the discussion with them. As you know, I was the budget chair during the good times and the bad times. And at that point in time in the late 90s, there were lots of heated discussions about whether we should go ahead and do some truth in budgeting. Those discussions were had again in the early 2000s. And as I have looked at truth in budgeting and transparency, it continued to befuddle me that going into making these tough decisions and these tough cuts, I knew historically, if you look longitudinally at the expenditures of state agencies and state government, that there was always from 1, and Charlie may know the better, down to 5% of access funding for salaries and benefits. It's there. I don't want to be crass and call it a slush fund, but it's there. It's a healthy balance at the end of every year. I believe with my fiscal responsibility, pot of money and a return of the rainy day fund, if our economy improves, that we'll have money to use in case of a rainy day. But again, I believe it's really incumbent on us as elected officials to actually do some truth in budgeting, to put it out there. And at the end of the day, this may be a way to actually reduce corporate and personal income tax when the economies become healthier again. Yeah.
There are several corrections facilities that are being closed down. Will this in any way shift that burden to the county level?
No. And that was one of the hardest choices. I thought you might ask me hard choices and easy choices. A hard choice for me, not because of the correction system, but because of the jobs. A couple of those counties where we're closing institutions who've been on the list for years. And it's the only way you can balance the budget is to make some of those tough decisions, are in counties that are very poor. And the biggest loss to them is going to be the prison economy and the jobs in those economy. And I've been reassured by by Charlie, who's my budget officer, and by the Department of Corrections that most of the folks who will lose their jobs, and that's part of the job lossage of the 1,400 count, will be able to find jobs within a 30 or 40 or 50 mile range in other corrections institutes. And that makes it a little more tolerable. But that was a hard decision. But it wasn't about correctional inmates or custody. We can transfer the inmates very safely and securely to other institutions that are now online that have the bed capacity. And that's what we'll do. But it is an economic development hit to many small communities. Yeah.
You have an interesting line in here about funding
Well, I'm using the state health plan data coming from the General Assembly. You know, it's the one enterprise that the governor has very little control over, other than actually the decision whether to sign or veto the bill. And as I've looked at the bill, the legislation that's going on there now, and as I've heard the discussion, I was alarmed to hear that unless some of the pieces of our health care plan were decreased or choices made that some of us have not chosen to make, that we'd see a 30% premium increase. And the state nor individual policyholders can afford that. And so with the reductions in the plan, we see about a 7.5% increase. And again, this morning we've checked with at least one of the leaders of the budget process that's ongoing, and they tell me the figures are good. I will keep the health plan solvent. Everybody knows that. Yeah.
How much do you think?
The guy who broke my news. I was glad, quite frankly.
How much do you think the average folks out there are going to feel in these cuts that you've got in there, and what would you say to them?
I think the average folks out there care about a couple of things, Mark. I don't think they're actually worried about the cuts line item by line item in this budget. If I weren't here, I wouldn't be. I would be concerned about the health and the integrity of my state, the capacity to provide the services that state government must provide, the non-diminishing lack of credibility we have across the country and world as a global economic provider, as a hub for job growth and innovation. And then the true issue is, and I'm listening to a lot of people, y'all know I'm traveling some now, because I learn more outside the Beltline than I do inside the Beltline, quite frankly. People are scared to death all over the state. They're not worried about what I'm doing. They're worried about what's happening in their kitchen and in their checkbook, and they're worried about what happens when they show up at work tomorrow. Are they going to be the one that's told that I'm the one to lose my job? That's what they care about. And somehow I believe if I can be the leader that helps re-embed in our state the trust through the transparency and the accountability and just the hard truth-telling, folks will feel better about government. And I think at the end of the day, we all win, because you and I both know the economy's going to improve. And you can't, y'all make fun of me when I say it, but it's just, you can't eat your seed corn. I can't not say it, because that's fundamentally what it is. If you read any of the writings of Max Gardner, you just see the dilemma he had. I've had those same dilemmas. And you make choices. You make hard, tough choices about how, when all this ends, that North Carolina won't be back behind somebody else, that we'll be in front. And I think the investments in many of the initiatives do that. But there is going to be pain. Some of the questions about cuts you haven't asked me, they'll be coming. And, I mean, there is people who are going to be, they'll feel it in their checkbook if they work for the state. But, you know, it is what it is. Yeah.
You did not propose any sales of income or other broad-based taxes. Can you just talk a little bit more about the rationale of not doing that versus doing the tobacco and alcohol taxes? Also, if the General Assembly gets to a point where they look at some of the cuts and find them unacceptable, would you resist or push back against if they decided they wanted to try to do a sales tax?
I hope they don't try it. I mean, I'm quite, and I'm not, but let me preface that, because it's really incumbent upon all of us. I said this morning to the team that had been over in the General Assembly. I said, it is so important to folks across this state that they see the folks that they elect to do their work, working together, not being partisan and not being territorial about one program or another, just working together for the good of the people. We are in tough times, unlike since the 30s, and I don't believe it helps any of us to get in these traditional struggles that you see occur every 2 years in the General Assembly. And I'm very hopeful to have really good relationships with the General Assembly. I'm going to do more than my part. I'm not going to be the feisty, sassy person y'all know me to be initially. But then when the going gets tough, I can get really tough too. And there are some fundamental decisions that I made in my budget that I'm certainly going to respect the General Assembly's elected capacity to do the same or to do differently. I don't understand how in a economy like we find ourselves in. And obviously all those revenue sources were on the sheets I looked at. And I just, one night, thinking about it all, made the decision, and I told Charlie and Andy and our team that I was not going to do anything that further diminished the income of a citizen in North Carolina. I didn't have a lot of happy days doing tobacco and alcohol, although I can mentally associate the improvement in health care costs to the increased cost of the product. And those are discretionary. When I go buy something like that at a store, I'm not going to admit that I buy it, but I have. I never once don't do it, and most people don't because they don't want a can of beer or a pack of cigarettes. Kids do. Some people do. And I think those increases then are things that those of us who choose to use those two products can afford to suck up to. But again, overall, I would be very reluctant if I were anybody in North Carolina with times as tight as they are to talk about an increase in corporate, personal income tax, or sales tax. I respect the power of the General Assembly to do what they may, but I would believe they're hearing the same conversations I'm hearing. One more, then I'm going to... Two more. She's better than I am.
Well, kind of dovetailing off that last question, how closely have you worked with the leaders in the legislature to make sure that when they produce their budget, you guys are roughly on the same sheet of paper?
I don't expect that we'll be working from the same sheet of paper. We did agree. It was already agreed upon when I became governor, I guess, or sometime before I was sworn in, to the to the revenue estimate for the second year. And so we're working from the same set of numbers. I'm, again, learning how to be more inclusive. You heard the speaker with the rainy day fund. I have learned a good lesson. I need to be much more direct in my conversations, and I am doing that. I had the leadership of both the House and the Senate to the office last week where I had long talks with them. I spoke to some of the Senate leadership yesterday and to the speaker late yesterday afternoon. It's my hope that we can work together because I think it's so important for the people. I mean, I just can't imagine in this time that anybody's served by bickering between branches of government. One more. You women don't ask questions. Come on.
So in dealing with the legislature, is there anything in this budget which is totally non-negotiable?
Oh, I'm too smart to answer that question today. I'm going to work hard for all of it, or I wouldn't be giving you the document. Some of it's going to be give and take. You've done this before. You've danced this dance before. There's going to be a lot of posturing this afternoon in the Appropriations Committee. We expect that. There are going to be a lot of negative things said. There might be some positive things. I'm going to listen and hope. And then at the end of the day, both the Senate and the House do what has to be done. The hope for all of us and for you all in your jobs is that North Carolina and America begins to recover, that the bottom is reached. But I believe this budget protects us either way. We are investing in the future. And at the end of the day, we are prepared to handle any further declines in the economy. Thank you all.